All
Second.
right, everyone. So, I was tasked with finding host to do science presentation for the day, and I cheated a little bit and volunteered my husband. So Leslie is going to do some. I'm going to let him use in his presentation a little bit of description of himself and what he does. That he works with oil and gas companies and does erosion control. But I'm going to let him promote right to you, and he's going to say, let him take your questions and stop him and all that good stuff.
Okay, good morning, everyone. As Carly said, I work with the erosion sediment control company called Filtrex. I've been with them for about 5 years now, actually 5 years in June. So I was tasked with doing a little bit of, we put this presentation out as reclaiming and replanting after oil and gas. There's not going to be quite as much heavy duty plant science in this as how we help take oil and gas land and put it back to usable farmland. So, why is this not working? There we go. So, I'll just start with the evolution of Filtrex. Filtrex is the company that I work for. Filtrex started as what we would consider a mesh company, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with compost filter sock, but Filtrex was the #1 company to do that. They come up with the idea. There was an abundance of composted wood mulch, basically kind of like your yard mulch that you use in your flower beds. They had a byproduct that they needed to get rid of. So they started doing research and they come up with the idea that compost traps sediment better than anything else. And there was a lot of failures on the side of silt fence and that stuff. So they come up with this idea in 2002. And then as they moved on, they went to, they did research and testing. They did a bunch of engineering and stuff. They went to the federal and the state levels, which Filtrex has approval in almost all 50 states. I think we're at like 48 with the exception of Alaska and Hawaii, I believe. So we are widely known in erosion and sediment control, but that was only as products. So then obviously, we did our own marketing and everything, and I won't spend a whole lot of time on that because it doesn't really pertain, but it just gives you an idea of how Filtrex started. Well, then in 1998, the company that I worked for was M&J Erosion. They started, and then basically they primarily did work in the mining industry and general construction. And then they just progressed as oil and gas started in 2003. They started moving towards that market. And then in 2003 to 2006, they were present in all the markets that were out there at the time, which would have been oil and gas, general construction, and mining. So then in 2006 is when the Marcellus Shale and well, not Utica. Utica started way later, but the Marcellus Shale started to ramp up. So they started really building towards that. And then in 2012, we merged with a company called Weaver Express out of Dover, Ohio. And we worked under M&J Weaver Express or Weaver Acquisitions for about 2 years. And then we were purchased by a company called Conway Plastics, which manufactured the mesh or the netting for Filtrex compost filter sock. Later in 2014, Filtrex decided because M&J Erosion Weaver Express were the largest installers of any of their products in the world, they wanted to purchase us. So in 2014, we were purchased by by Filtrex. So just a little bit about me. I did graduate from Penn State University in 2014. I had a major in agricultural science and a minor in agronomy. So right after college, I worked as a field foreman for M&J Erosion or Filtrex. I actually talked to my boss at Penn State. His daughter was going there, and we knew them prior to, but he told me to call him whenever I got out of school. He would try to get me on somewhere, not knowing at the time that his intention was to hire me. So I worked as a foreman, actually installing the products, silt sock, silt fence, compost, compost blankets, erosion control blankets, hydroseeding, doing all that. And then in 2016, I actually had a little bit of a mishap at home and had a little bit of an accident with a circular saw and was not able to work in the field. So they moved me to inside sales a little earlier than what Mike wanted to. And then, so I spent 2 years in inside sales, and then I moved to outside sales or territory sales manager in 2008. So basically what does Filtrex do? Filtrex does, we are an erosion and sediment control company, and we offer seeding services, and there are some other services that we offer. Basically talks about, we do installation of silt sock, super silt fence, regular silt fence, hydroseeding, erosion control blankets. We do conventional seeding, drill seeding. We are now into the right-of-way reclamation. So whenever a pipeline comes through and they windrow the topsoil and the pipe company comes through and puts the pipe in the ground, then we go back and push the topsoil back over and reclaim it back to what it was prior to the pipeline coming through. And then we do some rain garden and wet pond planting and some product sales. So I got a question here, and anybody can jump in. Does anybody know what is the biggest pollutant of Pennsylvania waterways by volume?
So Mrs. Anderson has her hand raised.
Yeah, she can unmute, that's fine.
Yep.
There we go. So I don't know which one it is, but we always teach our students that the big three are acid mine drainage, agriculture, and sedimentation.
So it is sediment by volume. If this will work, why is it not working again? There we go. Sorry. So it is sediment. So my question is, how do we stop sediment from reaching waterways? Well, we use perimeter control measures in what I will call phase one, and I'll show you some pictures here a little bit later on, so you'll be able to put like a picture to what I'm talking about. So perimeter control measures is we try to keep the soil on the site, which is really a big factor in farmland, because if they don't have their topsoil, they don't have anything. So most of the time what happens is they'll come in, they'll strip the topsoil, and then they'll put that in what they call a topsoil stockpile. And then we protect the stockpile by, one, putting a perimeter control around it, and then we also stabilize it. And that all has to be done within 3 days. Once they pile that topsoil into a stockpile, it's 3 days before it has to be stabilized that it can be open. Now, if you're going to be in it in 2 days, then it doesn't have to be. But that's the number one thing that we're trying to do, is we're trying to stop soil loss from a site, because we don't want it to get to a waterway, because when it does get to a waterway, it's a huge problem for, it back streams up. It's hard on fish. It's hard on fish habitat and so on. So then once we get the perimeter controls in and they start to actually build the site, then we come back and use practices like with seeding and erosion control blankets, which will be what we would call phase two. So that could be either hydroseeding, erosion control blankets, conventional seed and mulch. And then also we do offer some no-till seeding at times, but it really depends on the application of what we're looking for. No-till seeding, we don't see it a whole lot because the fact that it's already been basically tilled, because it's been shaped into a different contour than what it was. So the topsoil or the soil has actually been disturbed. So we don't do a whole lot of no-till seeding unless it's a farmer wants like alfalfa or something like that, then we would. So basically, I'll go quickly through this, a process of building an oil and gas. Yep,
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. Mrs. Anderson has a question.
Yep, go ahead.
Based on your experience, which methods are most effective for soil control?
Yeah. Basically, I will cover that a little bit more, but I'll touch on it real quick. It really depends on what your application at the time is. It really depends on the time of year. In all honesty, if I can hydroseed something, I'm going to hydroseed it. Because when you put the seed into the mixture, into the solution with the fiber mulch, fertilizer, lime, all that stuff, and you let it mix, you slowly let that seed absorb water. And as it absorbs water, it really jumpstarts the process. So if it's really hot and dry, and you let that seed absorb water the way that it does in a hydroseeding solution, 3 to 5 days, you're going to see growth if you have a good mix, a good seed mix, which I'll go over one of the ones that we use later. So in my opinion, a lot of times hydroseeding is a better application, but there's times you can't get like a hydroseeder to it. So then it really depends on the application. As far as growth, if you spray hydroseed on concrete, it will grow for at least 5 days until it runs out of water. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I know it's not an exact science, but when we teach it to our students about options for soil control or soil erosion control, I didn't know if there was something we should tell them works more effectively than others.
Well, and I think maybe I'll answer this a little bit more as we get a little further along here, as I get into more of talking about the different like erosion control blankets and that kind of stuff. I think it'll kind of come together for you.
Okay.
So basically, there's a process of building an oil and gas project, and there's 8 steps. So the first one is lease acquisition, which doesn't happen anything with me. The same way with plans, the plans being developed, the permitting. Now, where we start to get into anything is where we go bidding, the award, construction, and completion. And most of this presentation is going to be during the construction and the completion phase. So in construction, that's where they're actually building the project. And then when we come back in at completion, which would be at what we'll call the reclaim phase, is that they're putting that back to as close to original as possible while leaving the well pad. A lot of times they'll cut the well pad down. If it's a 300-foot by 300-foot pad, they'll cut it down to 150 by 150. But then they have to put that all back to as close to original contours as possible. So most of this presentation is going to be based in the construction and completion. Production is basically after we come in, reclaim everything, and then it just basically sits there and produces for years to come until the well runs dry or they decide to shut it in. So perimeter control and silt sock is trademarked by Filtrax. That's what we call it. The picture on the right that you guys can see is actually what we would consider a blower truck mesh. So it's actually, you go out with a machine and you blow it on site. So we import our material. It's 6-month aged hardwood compost. It has to be hardwood, cannot be any softwood. Because of the softwood, they will leach acid, and that is not what we're looking to do. We're looking to trap sediment and keep the water cleaned as actually leaving the site. So now water will leave a site with compost filter sock and site with silt fence, and I'll show you a little demonstration here in a minute and show you some things of why compost filter sock works a little better than silt fence. And then the one on the picture on the left is just a pallet. We palletize it in basically 8-inch, 12-inch, 18-inch, and 24-inch diameter. We can't do 32-inch, which we can utilize that with a blower truck because of the weight. So how's this? I know you're probably sitting here thinking, how's this tied to agriculture? Well, one of the biggest resources that farmers or ag people have is the land and the soil. And we are trying to protect it when we put in compost filter sock. A lot of times it's mostly subsoil because they've stripped the topsoil, as you can see in the photo on the right. They've already went through and stripped topsoil and they've stockpiled it and they've cleared it. So this one here isn't so much ag field, but it could be at some point when this is done. Because it's already been cleared, when they come back and they put it all back to the way that it is now, there's no trees, so the farmer wouldn't have to clear it. Whereas You know, before it was unusable land. Now it's going to be usable. So we have to put that back in mind, and say, okay, how can we make this usable for the farmer? Which is really why we want to protect everything we can and don't allow anything to leave. Not only protecting the waterways, but we're also trying to protect the farmer's number one resource. So that was silt sock. Now this is silt fence, and I'm going to use this a little bit to kind of show some different problems with silt fence. One of the biggest problems is silt fence is never installed correctly. When it is installed correctly, it does work to a degree, but it becomes a damming device. So this is why we've really moved away from silt fence and went to silt sock, is because you can see there's some stuff leaving the sites that shouldn't be. Has anybody ever seen anything like this to where they're just like, oh, that can't be good? You can just raise your hand. Yeah, I figured there'd be several people have seen this. So that's not really protecting a resource that agriculture professionals have. So again, that's why we go with compost filter sock. So then as we move on, this is basically just a little kind of a dimension that'll show you, or a presentation that'll show you basically as water hits silt fence, it backs up. Because it doesn't allow the flow through rate that compost filter sock does, it dams up, and then it'll do what it does in the previous pictures. It'll overtop, push it over, blow it out, whatever it does. Whereas now compost filter sock is considered a three-dimensional filter. And so basically as water comes in, it goes through, deposits the sediment, and then it comes out clean water. But it doesn't lose flow through rate or the ability to trap sediment as the water fills up. The only time it does that is once the sock is completely full, which does happen because there's a lot of open bare land whenever they're doing an oil and gas project. So there's a lot of times we have to go back in and replace. So we are losing some sediment, but we're keeping most of it in front of this sock on the site. So then, and like I said, I'm moving quickly on this because I'm sure there's going to be a ton of questions. The next phase is what we consider the seeding phase, or phase 2. So I'm talking mostly hydroseeding here, and that's what I have most of my pictures of, is that, you know, we use what we consider a 70-30 fiber mulch. It's a 70% wood and a 30% paper. We use Profile products. It's manufactured in South Carolina. And then there's also FlexTerra, which is for steep slopes, which would be used in applications where a landowner doesn't want an erosion control blanket with a plastic netting, or it's just going to be easier to use a hydroseeder. Then they have Proganics Dual with FlexTerra, which we utilize a lot, which Proganics Dual is not, I don't want to say it's a topsoil replacement, but if you don't have topsoil on the site, it is a really good alternative. You spray it down, you allow it to dry. You spray it like 3,500 pound to the acre. You allow it to dry, and then you FlexTerra over top of it. And it really, it's worked in situations where it's like a cut slope on what I'll call a cut slope on a well pad, where a coal seam has worked its way out, or something like that, where you can't get grass to grow. This is something that we do that allows grass to grow. And then there's EarthGuard, which is another product for some slope seeding. It's a liquefied emulsion, which you pour in the tank, and then it's basically a heavy tackifier, and you mix it up with 70-30 fiber mulch and spray it down, and it kind of cures and dries and binds to itself and forms a matting of sort. It's not a FlexTerra, which is what they consider HPFGM, a high performance flexible growth medium, but it's a good alternative. So then another part of seeding is we utilize erosion control blankets, which anytime you have a steep slope, an erosion control blanket is by far the better choice, um, because it has shear strength. It gets pinned to the ground with 6-inch U-shaped sod staples, and when you put those in, it allows the matting to get a good ground contact, so that as water flows across it, it doesn't allow it to wash the soil. So anytime you have a steep slope, there's a company that we work with that anything over a 3-to-1, which would be a 33.3% slope, they require an erosion control blanket of some sort or a Flexterra. The problem with Flexterra is when you put it on a steep slope, if it doesn't get the correct time to cure and a rain event occurs, it will wash that stuff off, which is why we tend to like erosion control blankets for stuff that's really steep, or it's a 3-to-1 or greater. It just makes a lot more sense, and it saves a lot more soil from leaving the site. Now, there are times, and this is where we have to work with the farmers and the company that we're working for, and to find out whether or not they want any type of erosion control blanket. Most of the time, if it's going to be on a section of property that they're not really going to use, they're not going to have animals on it, they say, yeah, that's fine, use erosion control blanket. But then there's other times, like this particular one, the farmer was going to build a fence at the top of this like cut slope here, and they didn't really want blanket, but it got permitted that way, and we were not allowed to change it because the DEP doesn't really care how you get vegetation, they just want vegetation. But because it fell within the parameters of the permit, it was harder to change. And so the farmer kind of said, well, I'll just move my fence to the bottom of it. So in that case, that all starts in the beginning. And that's not us, that's the land agents for the companies that we're working for. But we're really working hard to educate the farmers from the get-go of what this stuff is and how they need to be talking with their land agents so that they know exactly what they're getting. So now I've listed a few of the erosion control blankets here, like S75 would be a single net straw blanket. S150 is a double net straw blanket. The difference between them is the S150 carries more sheet flow or handles more sheet flow. SC150 would be a 70% straw, a 30% coconut, and it handles a lot more velocity. We have one company that uses that on their slopes, and that is it's okay, but it's a little heavy for the application. We don't always see the grass growth, and they're really starting to the farmers in Greene County are really starting to push back that because they don't like the fact that they're not getting the growth that they want. And then I'll quickly touch the SC250, like the turf reinforcement mats. Those are mainly for ditch lines, and we can't change these because the engineer designs them to handle a certain type of sheet flow. So if they spec out an SC250, we can't change that. It is designed to handle the type of load that it's going to get. So if it's designed with SC250, P300, or P550, the only thing we can change is we can do an equivalent. These are what they would consider North American green products. There's East Coast blankets and several other ones that make products that meet the same spec. They're just not called the same thing. That is the only thing we can change with turf reinforcement mats. And so basically from oil and gas back to farmland. And these are some pictures here. The top left picture is a really cool drone footage from one of my customers that this is pasture land. This is way up north in, I believe this is Beaver County. And basically what it was a well pad, and they, this was an impoundment, and they went back in, reclaimed the impoundment, and put this back to what it was originally. And you can see there now we utilized, this was in the wintertime, So we utilized hydroseeding and straw mulch over top of it. The reason we do that is because hydroseeding on its own will last about 6 weeks. The paper mulch will. So if we allowed that to sit over the winter time, it would actually continue to erode. So by utilizing straw mulch over top of it, and then tacking it down, it creates a different type of mat, and it will allow it to last through the winter. Now that application can't be used on anything that's steep. This was just absolutely flat, which is why we were able to do that. And then also with the winters we've been having, they've not been really cold. So we got a cold spell with this one, and then in like 3 weeks, it was in the 50s. And we actually had germination, and it was growing, and they were happy. The landowner was happy because actually he said that it was a lot of scrub brush, as you can see before, and he was actually happy because now he's able to put hay up on that property of an old strip mine because of what we did to get it back to the way it was. And our motto is yes, we want to get it back to the way it was before, but we want to make it better, which is why we continue to work with the farmer all the way through. And then the right-hand picture on the top, you can see is that's a pipeline right away that's going through a hay field. They did not want any type of blanket or anything. We did call to packet to break up some of the clods. There is a little bit of dozer tracks because they had to go fix something. So they fixed that. They had to go fix something else right away. So we didn't get to call to packet because we'd already moved our machine out. But this is what we're trying to do for the farmers, is so that we make sure they're able to use their land the way they did before, or even for more uses. Bottom left is kind of a hayfield section that they couldn't get to before because of it was just the way it was developed from the get-go. Well, then they had a slip and they fixed it. The company did, and they put the dirt back. And they actually put it back better than what it was before, so we were able to put a different type of seed mix on it and allow them to use it again. And then the bottom right-hand picture just is through a pasture field. So, you asked earlier that what method is best for everyone, or what method works best. It really matters to what the customer wants. Silt sock versus fence. There's places that people don't like silt sock. They think that when we come through and open it up and spread that mulch out, they think that that's going to damage their equipment. It really will not damage their equipment, because by the time they go to run their equipment across it, it's already broke down. So the easiest way to take care of silt sock, is you go through with a knife, cut the mesh, spread the mulch out, put some nitrogen fertilizer to it, seed it, mulch it, and you move on about your day. Fence, they think doesn't disturb as much because it just pulls a little trench out of the ground. You still have to seed and mulch it, but then you have to send all that material for the silk fence to a landfill, which this day and age our landfills are filling up. So as much as we can keep from going to the landfill, we try, which is why in the first place we designed compost filter sock. And then in the seeding part, hydroseeding versus other methods, hydroseeding is in the summertime is probably by far the best method, because it does allow that seed to absorb water from the jump. In the wintertime, it's probably not the best method unless you put straw over it like we did in the top left picture. But we really try to talk with the land agents. We try to talk with the landowner, the farmer, and see what they want. And then during that time of when they're leasing, they will develop seed mixes and all this stuff of what they want. And every once in a while, we'll get one that they want something completely crazy, and they tell us that it's going to grow, and we go to them and say, listen, this is not going to work the way that you want it to, because of it. They're trying to use let's say a warm season grass in a cool season area. So we really try to develop it with the customer and the landowner as we go. And it's really hard sometimes to change things along the way because of permitting and certain things. But we're really working to push that we get everything right at the beginning, which is why we're working with local farmers and doing seminars and that kind of stuff so that they know what they're up against when they go to lease and they know how to go through this and get what they want. The methods, you got to fit it for what the customer wants. And if the customer doesn't want matting, then you come up with an alternative. Is there methods that work better? Yeah. In my opinion, hydro seeding is one of the best. Drill seeding is really good as well. But it really matters what type of seed you're using. A lot of times you get heavier seeds and fluffier seeds. They don't go through a drill as well. So you need to either broadcast them or hydro seed them. Well, if it's in the dead of summer, I want to hydro seed it. I can't see the chat box.
Oh, you're muted, Carly.
So the erosion control method that's utilized is approved during the permitting process, but it's designed by the engineer. So the engineer has all of our design specs, and so they go through, they design it to handle the type of runoff and erosion that they think that they're going to get, and then it goes to the Pennsylvania DEP, and then they do their calculations, determine whether or not it's going to suffice, and if it is, then they approve it and they send it on, and then that's how it's approved basically. And then once it's approved, it's really hard to change. The DEP doesn't care how you get growth or how you stabilize or keep it from leaving the site really, but they definitely don't like to change, which is why most of the time in Pennsylvania, you do not see silt fence because they don't like silt fence. Compost filter sock got its start, and that's what it's been ever since. Ohio, they're exactly opposite. They like silt fence. They don't like compost filter sock. Why? I'm not sure. But basically, it's approved. The engineer designs it with our specs that we give them for flow through rates and effective heights, and then it goes to the DEP. And then once the DEP approves it, then it goes out for bid. Trying to find that chat.
Is the silt
Go ahead.
sock biodegradable?
Yes.
Okay, that's why I was listening to you say you just cut it open and you lay it there, and the mulch and everything in the soil that's in it gets reseeded and it's there. But I wasn't aware. What is that casing made out of?
Well, so actually, let me rephrase that. It is biodegradable, but we recommend you pull the mesh. The mesh is a certain type of plastic that is designed by our company. It's made of basically like a resin and oil mixture. So it is a plastic. So that's the only thing that does go to a landfill, but the type or the amount that goes to the landfill is way smaller than silt fence. So once you pull the mesh, then you spread the material out and then you seed it and mulch it. So Carly just brought up a good thing here. She walked over here. The DEP and engineers, I'm going to touch on this a little bit because it kind of starts with you guys. If you have somebody that wants to go into engineering or whatever, the engineers that do the plans, they tend to do a lot of copying and pasting. They don't do their own research. So they'll go to another set of plans, they'll copy something off of it, they'll put it onto a set of plans, and it doesn't even pertain to anything that we're doing. I ran into a set of plans the other day that had silt fence design on it that was for Georgia, and we're in Pennsylvania. We had to call the engineer and get it changed, and it was just a long process. So one thing to mention is that these guys, if they want to go into engineering, they really need to have the wherewithal to go do their own research and actually see what it does in the field. Because we can teach stuff out of a book all day long, but what actually occurs in the field may differ. It may look good on paper, but it may not work, which is why there's a lot of times we have problems with DEP. And like I said, they don't care how you get it. They just want you to get it, but they'll put out random specs for stuff. You know, they'll want big blue stem or switchgrass or something as a cover. Well, switchgrass in Pennsylvania is not going to grow the same as it is in, you know, a more warm state, North Carolina, South Carolina, or they'll spec Bermuda grass. Well, Bermuda grass in Pennsylvania is not going to do as well as it does in the southern states. So they really need to, and it starts with you guys, is that kind of tell them, hey, we need to do our own research, because that is a huge problem that we run into. And the DEP process is just absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion. They start a permitting process for a project basically 4 years in advance because they know it's going to take forever. So that's all I really have. I am open for discussion here. We've got a few minutes and I'll be here even later. So if anybody has anything else, feel free.
Could you talk a little bit about the cost of some of those products too? Like,
What is
is,
oh, I'm sorry.
it's okay, Dave. I was just curious, like, is silt fencing cheaper than the sock? Or obviously there's a price difference. Like,
so silt fence is cheaper. It is a cheaper product. Where we see the ground made up though is so if we install silt fence, we're probably installing it for like $2.75 a linear foot, versus and that would be for like a 24-inch silt fence. So an equivalent to a 24-inch silt fence would be a 12-inch compost filter sock, which we would install for basically $3.50. So you're looking at about a 75 cents a foot difference. And that's enticing to people, but where we really see compost filter sock shine is in the maintenance. Basically, if you take out a section of silt fence, you know, you have to replace 50 to 100 feet a lot of times if somebody backs over it with a dozer or knocks it out, just because of the way it's designed. With compost filter sock, you can take out, if you take out a 10-foot section, you just take that 10-foot section out, curl the ends up, stake them down, and put another piece in front of them, and you move on. And it takes, instead of having a 4-man crew to maintenance it, it takes a 2-man crew to maintenance it. So there is a cost difference, but it's made up on the other end in maintenance.
and who pays for that product? Is that part of the mining company's bid process? Like they have to, in other words,
Yes.
the farmer himself isn't paying that out of his pocket.
No, absolutely not. So whenever when the project is designed, it's put out to bid to contractors, and then we are a subcontractor, or we do the work directly for the project owner, and that is an associated cost with their operation. Like it's an operating cost that they know they're going to have. I know there was another question.
I think it was Dave Stormfeld's.
Yep, I was going to ask, what was I have two quick questions. What type of
go ahead.
grass seed do you typically use in different places? And then is your business only in a certain part of the state? Because we're up in Bradford County, I am, and we have a lot of oil and gas and pipeline work going on around here.
So we designed several years ago with the help of our seed salesman, or our local salesman, I guess he's a local store. And with Central Farm and Garden, we designed a mix that is geared towards Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. And it's what we would consider our reclamation mix. And it is a mixture of annual rye, tall fescue. There's several different type of clover in it, bird's foot trefoil, and I believe that's it. There might be a little bit of Timothy in it as well. I don't think there's much if there is. So we designed that because it's going to grow in most situations in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. As we move further south, which we are now, and working with the solar industry and that sort of thing, we're definitely working to develop another seed mix for that area. Down in, say, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, they use a lot of Bermuda grass, and we don't have a good mix with Bermuda grass in it, so we're working with our seed rep and designing that as we speak. And as to answer the second part of your question, are we only in a certain part of the state? We are based in southwestern Pennsylvania, so we're about an hour south of Pittsburgh. And then we also have a shop in Dover, Ohio, but we do cover New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, West Virginia, Virginia. So we will go a lot of places. And actually, Range Resources is in your area, and we're working to get a shop set up there to do a lot of their work. We do all of their work in this area, all their ENS. We do it directly for them, and they really want us to move a location up there so that we can take care of all of it up there for them too.
Can I just add really quickly too, Dave, to help? Their company is international, and also their products all over. Their install is only in certain areas, and they're working to expand on that, if that helps. Like, so as far as getting the silk socks, anyone can go buy that anywhere. But their install and their crews are only right now located south of Pittsburgh and in Dover, Ohio.
Yeah. Man, tough crowd today.
We can stay on for questions for a little while yet. Beth wanted me to remind everyone to go back to the main meeting room after this when you leave here, so she can put you into your breakout rooms for the hot topic discussion series. So whenever you want to go, you can go, and if you want to stay on and ask more questions, we can stay for a little while yet.
Does your company offer opportunities for students that maybe either in the summertime, like they might have to be older, senior or junior, but do they offer any opportunities